Welcome to Revenge with Roman, where heartbreak fuels justice and betrayal turns into poetic payback. Today's story, my cheating ex's proposal turned into his biggest public humiliation, takes you into a world of raw emotions, shattered trust, and a masterfully executed revenge that no one saw coming. It's a tale of love gone wrong, deceit exposed, and one woman's journey from being broken to becoming the one who controls the ending. Emily Carter had always believed that love, no matter how messy or complicated, deserved honesty. For 3 years, she had given her heart, time, and trust to Ryan, her charming, ambitious boyfriend who made her feel like the luckiest woman alive. They had talked about marriage, kids, even the color of the house they'd one day build together. To everyone else, they looked like the perfect couple. Instagram-worthy, always smiling, always in sync. But behind that glossy illusion, something darker had started to creep in. It began with small things: late-night work calls, unread messages, unexplained absences. Ryan's attention, once so steady, began to drift. Emily tried to ignore the unease in her chest, convincing herself that she was overthinking, that maybe stress at work was just taking a toll on him. Then one night, everything changed. Emily was at Ryan's apartment, planning to surprise him with dinner after his supposed business meeting. She remembered how excited she was, how she laughed to herself while setting the table, imagining his face when he walked in. The clock ticked past 9, then 10, and still no sign of him. His phone went straight to voicemail. Something felt off. Against her better judgment, she decided to check his laptop, which he'd carelessly left on the desk. She had never gone through his things before. She hated the idea of snooping. But that night, instinct overpowered trust. The screen lit up, and with a trembling hand she opened his messages. What she found made her world stop. There were photos, intimate, undeniable, of Ryan with another woman. A woman Emily recognized instantly. Her name was Chloe, a colleague from his office, someone who had always been overly friendly at parties and company events. The messages between them weren't just casual flirtations. They were filled with affection, longing, and plans. Plans for a future that Ryan had once promised Emily. Reading them felt like a knife twisting deeper with every word. "I can't wait to be done with her," one message read. "She's sweet, but she's not you." Emily's hand shook so violently that she nearly dropped the laptop. Her chest burned, her breath caught in her throat. Every memory, every "I love you," every promise, they all crumbled into ashes. She didn't cry right away. Instead, a strange numbness settled over her. She sat there for hours, staring blankly at the wall, replaying every moment they'd shared, and realizing how carefully he had played his part. The romantic dates, the sudden compliments, the way he looked at her. All of it was a performance. But what broke her completely was the calendar notification that popped up on the screen at midnight. Proposal rehearsal, Friday, 7 p.m. Ryan was planning to propose. To her, the irony of it was almost cruelly poetic. The same man who had been sleeping with another woman was preparing to publicly declare his undying love. For a long moment, Emily didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Part of her wanted to confront him immediately, throw the laptop at his face, demand answers. But then, something inside her shifted. Beneath the pain, a cold calm began to take over. She realized this wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. Ryan had taken her love for granted, assuming she'd never find out, assuming she'd play her part in his perfect story. But Emily wasn't going to be the naive, broken-hearted woman who cried quietly in the shadows. If he wanted a public spectacle, she'd give him one, just not the kind he imagined. The days that followed were a blur of quiet observation and silent planning. She acted normal around Ryan, masking her heartbreak behind a practiced smile. When he mentioned his special plans for the weekend, she pretended to be surprised and touched. "You're being mysterious again," she teased, forcing a light laugh. Inside, she was falling apart, but on the surface, she played her role flawlessly. He had no idea she knew everything. He had no idea that every kiss, every word, every touch was now part of a script she was rewriting. Each night, Emily replayed the betrayal in her mind, fueling the resolve building inside her. She didn't want to simply end things. She wanted him to feel the same helplessness, The same public humiliation that he had so casually risked subjecting her to. He had made her believe she was special, only to turn her into a fool. So, she began to think about how to turn the stage he had built for his big moment into his downfall. If he wanted everyone watching when he declared his love, then everyone would also watch when the truth came out. But before any plan could take shape, she had to hold herself together. That was the hardest part. There were moments when she'd catch herself staring at him while he talked, wondering how he could lie so easily. He'd smile at her, hold her hand, talk about their future, while another woman's perfume still lingered on his clothes. Every time he said, "I love you," it felt like a dagger twisting deeper. But Emily forced herself to respond with the same warmth as always. Because now she wasn't just a heartbroken girlfriend. She was the calm before the storm. By the time Friday approached, Emily had gathered all the proof she needed. Screenshots, photos, timestamps, everything. She didn't know exactly how the proposal would unfold, but she knew one thing. It would not end the way Ryan planned. She wasn't going to scream or cry or beg for answers. No, she would let him walk right into his own trap, the same way he had led her into heartbreak. And when the moment came, she'd make sure everyone saw him for who he truly was. The stage was set, and Emily Carter was done being the victim. The morning after discovering Ryan's betrayal, Emily woke up with swollen eyes and a hollow ache in her chest. But beneath the pain, something new stirred, a sense of clarity. For 3 years, she had built her world around him. Now, that world had collapsed, and all that remained was her determination not to let him destroy her dignity. She stood before the mirror, her reflection pale and tired, and whispered to herself, "You will not cry for him again." It wasn't a declaration of strength yet. It was survival. But that quiet promise became the seed of something powerful. Over the next few days, Emily decided to do what no one expected from a betrayed woman. She stayed calm, composed, even affectionate. When Ryan called her his favorite girl, she smiled. When he texted about the special surprise he was planning, she sent back heart emojis. Every word, every gesture was a mask, carefully chosen to keep him unsuspecting. She knew him well. His ego thrived on admiration and obedience. The last thing he'd ever expect was that she was 2 steps ahead, planning his downfall with a grace that would one day haunt him. At work, Emily acted normal. Her colleagues had no idea of the storm brewing inside her. When Chloe, the woman who had destroyed everything, passed by in the hallway, Emily didn't even flinch. She smiled politely, though her heart raced. Seeing her in person made it all feel real. The same woman who had laughed with her at company events, who had asked about her relationship, who had even hugged her during birthdays, was the one secretly sharing her boyfriend's bed. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was humiliating. But Emily refused to let anger cloud her judgment. She needed her composure because she was building something bigger than rage. She was building a reckoning. Ryan's proposal was scheduled for Saturday night at an upscale rooftop restaurant overlooking the city skyline. He wanted it to be perfect. Flowers, candles, friends, even a photographer to capture the moment. The irony of it all wasn't lost on Emily. He wanted to create a public scene of love, but he had no idea it would end as a public scene of humiliation. Still, Emily knew that to make the moment truly unforgettable, she had to play her part flawlessly. If she showed any sign of knowing the truth, he might change his plans. So she pretended everything was fine, better than fine even. That week, Ryan was more attentive than usual. He sent her flowers at work, texted her sweet messages, and talked about how nervous he was about Saturday. Every message was like acid on her skin, but Emily smiled through it. She even posted a story of the flowers with the caption, "He still gives me butterflies." Her friends flooded the comments with heart emojis and jealous compliments. She hated how easy it was to keep up the illusion, how easy it was to make the world believe in a love that had already died. But every lie she told now was strategic, every gesture calculated. The more genuine she looked, the harder he would fall. At night, she lay awake replaying the proposal in her mind, planning every step. She had all the evidence saved on a hidden drive, screenshots of messages, photos, everything. The only question was when and how to reveal it. Should she let the audience see it live? Should she speak? Or should she let the images speak for themselves? She decided on subtlety. She wanted silence first, that deafening moment when the truth hit everyone like a thunderclap. She imagined the shock on his face, the whispers spreading through the crowd, the shift in his confident posture when the truth came crashing down. That vision kept her going, like a spark of justice in a dark tunnel. But acting normal around Ryan wasn't easy. He had no idea that every "I love you" he said made her stomach twist. One night, when they were having dinner together, he reached for her hand and said softly, "You'll never forget this weekend." She smiled at him, but inside she thought, "You're right, neither of us will." He laughed, unaware that the woman sitting across from him had already stopped being his lover. She was now his reckoning, his mirror, reflecting every lie he ever told. Emily's best friend, Natalie, noticed something different in her. "You seem calm," she said one afternoon over coffee. Emily smiled faintly. "I'm just tired of crying," she replied. Natalie didn't press further, but she studied Emily carefully, sensing there was more behind that calmness. Emily wasn't just calm, she was focused. Every day brought her closer to Saturday, closer to the moment when all the pretending would end. By Friday evening, Ryan was buzzing with excitement. He kept dropping hints, telling her to dress nicely, teasing that she'd never guess what was coming. Emily played along, feigning confusion and delight. Inside, her heart was steady, her mind sharp. She had rehearsed her emotions, her expressions, her every move. The thought of standing there, in front of everyone, knowing what she knew was terrifying, but also liberating. She wasn't walking into that proposal as a broken woman. She was walking in as the author of his humiliation. The night before the proposal, Emily stood by her window, looking at the city lights reflecting off the glass. She thought about how love had turned into betrayal, and betrayal into purpose. Her eyes no longer held the tears of a victim, they held fire. Ryan believed he was about to start a new chapter of his life, one filled with celebration and admiration. But Emily knew better. She was going to let him finish his speech, let the world watch him shine for a brief moment. And then, when the spotlight was brightest, she would flip the script. The man who thought he could play with her heart was about to learn that some women break quietly, but rebuild into something he'll never forget. Saturday evening arrived like the calm before a storm. The sky was painted in shades of gold and crimson as the sun dipped behind the skyline, casting a soft glow over the rooftop restaurant Ryan had rented for his grand proposal. It was elegant, lavish, and romantic, exactly how he wanted it to be. White roses lined the edges of the terrace, fairy lights twinkled like stars overhead, and a string quartet played in the corner, their music floating softly through the warm evening air. Everything was perfect, meticulously planned down to the smallest detail. To the guests arriving, friends, colleagues, and family, it looked like a fairy tale moment. To Emily, it looked like a stage built for betrayal to crumble in front of everyone. As she stepped out of the elevator and onto the rooftop, heads turned. Emily wore a deep red satin dress that clung to her in all the right places. Her hair was curled loosely, framing her face. Her lips painted a soft crimson that matched the quiet fire in her eyes. Ryan had always told her red was his favorite color on her. It made her look unforgettable. Tonight, that statement would come true, though not in the way he imagined. She forced a small smile when she saw him waiting near the arch of flowers, dressed in a tailored black suit, flashing that same confident grin that once melted her heart. Now, it just made her skin crawl. "God, you look beautiful," Ryan said, kissing her hand. His eyes gleamed with pride as guests turned to admire them. He loved attention, loved being the center of admiration, and tonight he was basking in it. Emily could see it. The way he puffed his chest, the subtle glances he threw around, as if the whole world revolved around his perfect moment. She played her role flawlessly, smiling softly and leaning into him, her voice sweet, controlled, and calm. "You've outdone yourself," she whispered, and he grinned, taking that as the praise he believed he deserved. The evening began with laughter and drinks. Everyone mingled, took photos, and commented on how radiant Emily looked. how happy Ryan seemed. A few people hinted at what they suspected was coming, a proposal. But Emily just laughed, her smile hiding the storm beneath. Every word she spoke felt like walking a tightrope. Her heart pounded, but her face remained serene. The calm in her voice didn't reveal the chaos in her chest. She wasn't just pretending to be in love, she was performing. Every gesture, every laugh, every glance was a calculated move in the act she'd decided to finish on her own terms. When dinner was served, Ryan barely ate. He kept glancing at his watch, clearly nervous and excited. The photographer he'd hired discreetly moved around, capturing moments of the evening, the laughter, the clinking glasses, the stolen glances. Emily knew those photos would later serve as the backdrop to his humiliation. She watched him raise his glass to make a toast, his words dripping with charm. "To love, to honesty, and to new beginnings," he said. Emily nearly laughed at the irony, but bit the inside of her cheek to keep her expression steady. "To new beginnings," she repeated quietly, her tone laced with meaning only she understood. After dinner, Ryan signaled the musicians to stop. The chatter faded, replaced by soft piano music. The air shifted. Everyone could feel that something big was about to happen. Ryan took Emily's hand and led her to the center of the rooftop, under a canopy of glowing fairy lights. "You've made me the happiest man alive," he began, his voice trembling slightly. The guests watched with eager smiles, phones ready to record the moment. Emily stood still, her heart racing not with love, but with anticipation. "You are my everything," he continued, looking into her eyes. "My reason, my home, my forever." The words that once would have made her melt now rang hollow, empty, almost mocking. She could see through every syllable, see the rehearsed emotion, the false sincerity, and yet she nodded slightly, playing the part of the emotional girlfriend, letting tears glisten at the corners of her eyes. Ryan smiled proudly, mistaking those tears for joy. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a velvet box. Gasps filled the air. He knelt down, his grin widening. "Emily Carter," he said dramatically, "will you marry me?" The crowd erupted in excitement. The lights shimmered brighter, cameras flashed, people clapped and cheered. For a heartbeat, Emily just stood there, looking down at him. The man she once thought she'd spend her life with. She saw not love, but lies, deceit, and arrogance. Her hand trembled, not because she was nervous, but because the moment she had been preparing for was finally here, the moment where everything would turn. She smiled softly, the same smile that had always made him think he had her wrapped around his finger. Then, she took a deep breath and looked over his shoulder, straight at the big LED screen that Ryan had arranged behind them to display their proposal photos. Ryan, still on one knee, noticed her gaze and smiled wider. "Don't worry," he said, laughing. "I had them prepare something special." He gestured to his friend controlling the display. The screen flickered, ready to show a slideshow of their happiest memories. But instead of their smiling faces, a message appeared. "Let's start with honesty." Then, photo after photo began to appear. Screenshots of Ryan's texts with Chloe, photos of them together, time-stamped messages filled with lies and confessions. The crowd went silent. The music stopped. Ryan froze, the color draining from his face as his own betrayal flashed across the screen for everyone to see. Emily stood there, calm and unflinching. The whispers started, quiet at first, then louder, spreading like wildfire. The guests gasped, phones lowered, and a few even turned away in awkward silence. Ryan stood up abruptly, his voice breaking. "Emily, what is this?" She tilted her head slightly, her voice steady and cold. "Your truth, Ryan. You said tonight was about new beginnings, right?" His face twisted, panic taking over as he looked around, realizing his perfect night was collapsing in front of everyone. And in that moment, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. She didn't need to scream, didn't need to cry. The truth was speaking for her, louder than any words could. The man who thought he could cheat, lie, and still have his picture-perfect proposal, now stood exposed, stripped of his charm and confidence. The humiliation on his face was almost poetic. Emily simply turned away, the sound of whispers and shock trailing behind her like fading music. Ryan stood frozen, his hand still clutching the ring box that moments ago symbolized triumph, but now looked like a relic of arrogance. The glow of the fairy lights flickered across his pale face as the crowd absorbed what they had just seen. Some whispered, some stared in disbelief, and others quietly put their phones down, unsure whether to record or show respect for the unfolding disaster. The slideshow continued mercilessly, message after message, each one a nail in the coffin of Ryan's image. "You're so much better than her. She'll never know. I'll propose to her soon. It'll make ending it cleaner." The words hung in the air like poison. Emily watched him with a detached calmness, her heart no longer racing. The chaos around her felt distant, like watching a movie she had already seen. The faces of their friends told the whole story: shock, pity, confusion. Even Chloe, standing toward the back of the crowd, looked as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet. Emily had expected her to show up. Ryan had insisted Chloe couldn't make it, but Emily knew better. She knew Chloe would be there, watching proudly as Ryan proposed to his angel, believing she was part of some twisted inside joke. Now, Chloe's expression was pale and broken, her perfect lipstick trembling as the evidence of her role blazed across the screen for everyone to see. "Emily, stop this." Ryan's voice cracked, panic bleeding through his words as he lunged toward the sound technician, trying to end the display, but it was too late. The images had done their damage. The audience had seen enough. Murmurs rose among the guests, his co-workers whispering in disgust, friends exchanging uncomfortable glances. His boss, who had come as a mentor and supporter, stood rigid, jaw clenched, embarrassment etched across his face. This wasn't just a personal scandal now. It was professional suicide. Is this some kind of joke? One woman muttered loudly, and another guest replied under her breath, "Guess he's the joke." The quiet laughter that followed made Ryan's hands shake. He turned back to Emily, his eyes wide and desperate. "You don't understand. This isn't what it looks like," he stammered, his words falling flat. The crowd didn't believe him. They didn't need to. The truth was written on the giant screen for everyone to see. Emily took a slow step forward, her heels clicking against the polished floor, every movement deliberate and graceful. The red dress she wore glowed under the lights, a symbol of both love and bloodshed. "No, Ryan," she said softly, her voice calm and unwavering. "I understand perfectly. You wanted everyone here to witness your love. I just made sure they saw what kind of love it really was." The words hit him harder than a slap. He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out, no excuse, no apology, just silence. Chloe finally moved, stepping forward with shaky steps, her eyes darting between Ryan and Emily. "Emily, I didn't mean," she began, but Emily cut her off with a glance so cold it silenced her instantly. "Save it," Emily said quietly. "You knew. You both did." For a brief moment, the rooftop was utterly still. The only sound the faint hum of the city below. Then, somewhere in the crowd, someone started clapping, slow, deliberate. It wasn't mockery. It was acknowledgement. Others joined in, hesitant at first, then bolder. The applause grew louder, echoing through the night. Not for Ryan's grand gesture, but for the woman who had turned humiliation into power. Ryan's face twisted in horror as he realized the applause wasn't for him. "Stop!" he shouted, his voice breaking, but it only fueled the humiliation. His perfect night, his picture-perfect image was shattered beyond repair. The proposal ring slipped from his hand and clattered onto the ground, rolling until it stopped at Emily's feet. She glanced down at it, then looked back up at him. "You should keep that," she said softly. "You'll need it for your next performance." He stepped toward her, desperation written all over him, reaching out as if he could somehow undo what had just happened. "Emily, please, can we talk, just us? You can't do this here," he pleaded, his voice almost breaking. Emily took a step back, her expression unreadable. "You already did this here, Ryan," she said evenly. "You cheated, you lied, you played with people's hearts. I just made sure the curtain fell while everyone was watching." The murmurs grew louder again, guests beginning to disperse, some shaking their heads, others muttering under their breath about what they had just witnessed. The once romantic rooftop now felt suffocating, the air thick with tension and disbelief. The The flowers that had looked so beautiful an hour ago now felt like props in a tragic play. The fairy lights flickered, dimming as if the night itself was ashamed of what had unfolded beneath it. Emily turned to leave, her head held high. But before she could take a step, Ryan called out one last time. "You'll regret this," he shouted, his voice breaking with anger and humiliation. She stopped but didn't turn around. "No, Ryan," she said softly, her tone almost kind. "You will." Then she walked away, her red dress flowing behind her like a curtain closing on the final act. As she reached the elevator, she caught one last glimpse of the chaos she had left behind. Guests whispering, Chloe crying, Ryan standing in the middle of the mess he had created, alone and exposed. The once confident man who had always controlled the room now looked small, lost, and powerless. The music had stopped. The laughter had vanished. And the night that was supposed to mark the beginning of his new life had instead become the graveyard of his reputation. When the elevator doors slid shut, Emily exhaled for the first time all night. The rush of adrenaline still coursed through her, but beneath it was peace. Cold, quiet peace. She didn't feel guilt or satisfaction, just relief. The truth was out. The performance was over, and as the elevator descended, Emily realized she hadn't just exposed Ryan. She had freed herself. Outside, the cool night air wrapped around Emily like a quiet embrace. The moment she stepped out of the building, the city's noise felt strangely distant, muted under the weight of everything that had just happened. Her heart was still racing, her hands trembling slightly from the adrenaline, but her mind was clearer than it had been in months. She had imagined this moment 100 times, wondered if she would cry, scream, or break down. But none of that happened. She felt still, composed, and strangely light. It wasn't happiness, not exactly, but it was freedom. The chains Ryan had wrapped around her with his lies had finally fallen away, piece by piece, under the glow of 1,000 shocked faces. As she walked toward the street, her phone buzzed violently in her clutch. Calls from Ryan, a few from mutual friends, and even one from Chloe. She ignored them all. The buzzing continued, persistent and frantic, but Emily didn't need to hear excuses or apologies. What could they possibly say? That it was a misunderstanding? That they didn't mean to hurt her? Words couldn't fix what they had broken, and she wasn't interested in hearing the same voices that had once whispered betrayal behind her back. For the first time in years, silence felt better than answers. She reached her car, took a deep breath, and rested her forehead against the steering wheel. Her reflection in the rearview mirror looked different, stronger somehow. Her eyes, though tired, held something sharp, something fierce. The woman staring back wasn't the same one who used to wait up for Ryan, worrying if he was safe, wondering why he wasn't answering her calls. That version of Emily had been fragile, hopeful, and too willing to forgive. The one sitting here now had learned the hardest lesson. Sometimes love isn't lost, it's escaped. Her phone buzzed again, and this time, she glanced at the screen. A message from Ryan flashed across it. "Please, let me explain. You've ruined my life." Emily let out a soft laugh, bitter, disbelieving. The irony was almost poetic. The man who had played with her emotions, who had made her question her worth, now claimed she had ruined his life. She typed back slowly, each word deliberate. "No, Ryan, you did that yourself." Then she hit send and blocked his number without hesitation. The final act of closure. She drove aimlessly through the city for a while, the lights blurring past her as her thoughts drifted. Every landmark she passed felt like a ghost of the life she'd shared with him. The coffee shop where they'd had their first date, the bridge where he'd said he loved her for the first time, the park where they'd talked about their future. Each memory was sharp, like glass under her skin, but she didn't flinch. Letting go wasn't painless. It was powerful. Painful power was still power, and Emily had finally reclaimed hers. Eventually, she pulled over by the river, where the water shimmered under the moonlight. The air was cool, calm, and quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos she'd left behind. She sat there for a long time, just watching the reflection of the city ripple across the water. It felt symbolic, the way the water distorted the skyline, breaking it apart and reshaping it over and over. That's what healing was, she realized. Not erasing what happened, but reshaping yourself around it. Learning to see beauty even in the cracks. Her phone buzzed again, this time with messages from friends. "Emily, are you okay? I can't believe what happened." "You're incredible. He deserved every bit of that." Emily smiled faintly but didn't respond. She appreciated their support, but she didn't do this for applause or validation. She didn't want to be a hero in someone else's story. She just wanted peace in her own. Tonight wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. And truth, she realized, had a way of freeing you even as it burned everything else to the ground. After a while, she opened her social media, curious. Her notifications were overflowing. Tags, mentions, reposts. Someone had captured the moment the slideshow appeared and posted it online. The caption read, "When karma shows up wearing red." The video already had thousands of views, hundreds of comments, some shocked, some cheering her on. "Queen behavior," one comment read. Another said, "He got exactly what he deserved." For a second, Emily felt that old pang of humiliation, the fear of being seen, of being talked about. But then she realized she wasn't the one being pitied. Ryan was. She had turned her own humiliation into his, and now the whole world knew who he truly was. Still, she didn't feel joy from it, not the kind of joy revenge movies promised. What she felt was quiet satisfaction, the kind that comes from finally setting something right. The night wind brushed her hair, carrying away the last traces of the perfume she'd worn for him. It was strange how love could turn into ashes and still feel warm in its aftermath. As the clock crept toward midnight, Emily turned off her phone and leaned back in her seat. The city lights reflected in her eyes, soft and distant. She thought about how easily she could have fallen apart, how she almost let betrayal define her. But tonight proved something different. She wasn't defined by what happened to her, but by how she chose to respond. And she had responded with strength, poise, and precision. A quiet smile touched her lips as she started the engine. The world would keep talking, Ryan would keep spiraling, and Chloe would keep trying to explain, but none of it mattered anymore. The version of Emily who needed closure no longer existed. She had written her own ending, and as she drove away, the city stretched before her like a blank page, waiting for the next chapter. One where she didn't need revenge to feel powerful, just the courage to keep walking forward. Days turned into weeks, and the uproar surrounding that unforgettable night slowly began to fade, at least publicly. The rooftop scandal had become something of a legend among their social circle, whispered about in hushed tones at offices, dinner parties, and coffee shops. Everyone had a version of the story, but only Emily knew the truth. The calm precision behind every move, the quiet pain that fueled her strength. She didn't correct the rumors or defend herself. She didn't need to. The truth had already spoken louder than anything she could ever say. Ryan tried to rebuild what was left of his reputation, but his downfall was swift. His company distanced itself from him. His colleagues stopped answering his calls, and Chloe, his partner in betrayal, disappeared from the picture entirely. No more rooftop dinners, no more perfect photo ops, no more pretending. For a man who lived for appearances, the silence that followed was his punishment, and Emily didn't have to lift a finger. She just watched from afar as karma did what it always does, finish the job with quiet precision. She, on the other hand, began to find herself again. It wasn't easy. The first few weeks were filled with strange emptiness. For so long, her life had revolved around someone else. His moods, his plans, his lies, that she had forgotten what it felt like to live for herself. Now mornings were hers again. She'd wake up to sunlight spilling across her apartment, make coffee without checking her phone, and enjoy the stillness she used to mistake for loneliness. It was peace. Real, unshakable peace. One evening, as she was leaving her office, she saw a familiar figure standing near the parking lot. Ryan. He looked different, tired, thinner, his once perfect confidence replaced by something desperate. For a moment, she almost didn't recognize him. When he saw her, his eyes lit up with a mix of regret and longing. "Emily," he called softly, taking a hesitant step toward her. She froze, not in fear, but in disbelief that he had the nerve to face her again. "I just wanted to talk," he said, his voice low, shaky. "I need you to know I'm sorry. I made a mistake, a huge one. I lost everything." His words hung in the air, heavy and hollow. Emily looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, she didn't feel anger or pain. She felt nothing. The part of her that had once loved him, that had burned with betrayal, no longer existed. It was like looking at a stranger wearing a familiar face. "Ryan," she said quietly, "you didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice, and now you're living with it." He opened his mouth to speak again, but she raised a hand to stop him. "I don't hate you," she continued. "In a strange way, I should thank you. You taught me exactly what I never want again." Her voice was calm, unshaken, and that composure stung him more than any cruel word could have. He stared at her, eyes wet, lips trembling, but she didn't stay to hear whatever came next. She simply turned and walked away. As she drove off, she didn't look back. For once, the rearview mirror held no ghosts, only the open road ahead. The city lights blurred in the distance, and for the first time in a long time, Emily smiled, not because she had won, but because she had healed. Weeks later, she found herself sitting at a small cafe downtown, reading a book while the rain tapped gently against the window. A stranger at the next table smiled at her, offered a polite hello. He was kind, his eyes steady, his demeanor nothing like Ryan's confident arrogance. They talked, briefly, easily. She didn't feel sparks or the rush of a fairy tale moment, but she felt something better. Comfort. Safety. A beginning that wasn't built on deception. When she left the cafe that evening, she paused for a moment outside, looking up at the gray sky. The world was still unpredictable, still messy, but it was hers again. She took a deep breath, letting the rain brush against her skin, washing away the last remnants of the past. There was no bitterness left in her, only quiet strength. She had faced betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak, and turned it all into power. As she walked down the street, her heels clicking softly on the wet pavement, Emily Carter no longer carried the weight of what had been done to her. She carried the lesson it taught her, that sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone else. It's about rebuilding yourself so completely that they no longer have a place in your story. And somewhere, in another part of the city, Ryan probably still replayed that night in his mind, still wondered how everything slipped away so quickly. But Emily didn't care anymore. Her story had moved on without him, and for the first time since everything began, she felt truly free.